You're never gonna have a girlfriend after this. You're such a good liar.
Everyone thinks they know why Rob Rausch won season 4 of The Traitors. They see the jawline, the Alabama swag, and that disarming smile, and they chalk it all up to pretty privilege. They think because he's so good looking, he's just lucked his way into a $220,000 jackpot. But they were all wrong. This wasn't just some dumb pretty boy luck. This was surgical, silent, dominant takeover. While the rest of the cast was busy playing a version of themselves for the cameras, Rob R was playing a high stakes game of psychological chess that started before he even stepped into the castle. He didn't just survive the game, he sculpted every second of it. And here's the most impressive part. In a castle with 23 other contestants, including professional actors and previous $1 million game show winners, not a single person realized they were being outplayed by Rob. While he was deciding everyone else's fate, they just saw him as a simple farmer boy from Love Island. Now, if you happen to click on this video without knowing much about the show, here's the gist. Alan Cumming is the TV show host and the game master for the US version. So contestants move into a castle in Scotland to compete for $250,000. Now, this money is earned every single episode. A few of the contestants early on are then selected to be traitors by Alan. Their main job as a traitor is to murder innocent faithfuls every night and then lie their way to the very end. As for everybody else, they are faithfuls. Their only goal is to sniff out the traitors and vote them out at the round table. Now, if they're able to do this until the very end, they will share the jackpot. So essentially, the faithful must win as a team, and a traitor can win as a team or win the game by themselves. Today, we're taking a deep dive of how Rob Rausch became the last man standing as a traitor and won the entire jackpot by himself. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if you made it this far in the video. First off, we're going to talk about Rob's branding. In the show, he immediately introduces himself as someone who was on Love Island, a popular dating show from the same network. Rob positioned himself perfectly because players didn't see him as a threat. If you're stuck in a room and you know that there will be people who are lying to you, you're going to subconsciously figure out who is most likely to lie. So playing the guy from Alabama is a lot easier because he just seems to be like the kind of guy who just happens to be there because the network wants to do some crossover promotions. I would say that early in the game, people are going to start focusing more on people who have won other game show competitions like Survivor or Big Brother. It's a lot easier to look at them and say, hey, this guy has a capability to lie to me. So I think overall, it does help that Rob has Maura, who's also from Love Island. And if she knew him, she's gonna go around and say like, "Yeah, I know this guy. He's very sweet."
It's nice to see a familiar face.
Yeah, you
You
too.
better stick by me.
Maybe.
More on personal branding, we're gonna have to take a closer look into his outfits and how he presents himself inside the castle. Now, was he the most fashionable day to day? Probably not. Rob was known to wear these overalls. He was known to show off his snake tattoos on his arms. So he was often in sleeveless outfits. And I would say the most iconic look is the overalls, sometimes without a shirt. Now, if you dig into some of the post show interviews that Rob does, he shares that he didn't bring overalls to the game. Production actually went out and decided to get him some new ones. It would make a lot of sense for production to go out and buy him this look because, from the same network, they want to continue this branding. So, what started off as an image for marketing purposes and eye candy for fans, it ended up being a huge benefit for Rob. Imagine yourself as one of the players. You're going to look at him and be like, this sweet, nonchalant boy, he's not going to stab me in the front or in the back. Now, I would say production gave him the advantage, but beyond the clothes, Rob is just naturally a very chill guy. This matters the most. Even in episode 1, where everybody made their introductions, he didn't really show up as the loudest person or seeked the center of attention. There are players who are jumping up and down from excitement, and there are players like Rob, who's not necessarily nervous, he's just observing everybody else. Rob was able to keep his natural personality throughout the whole show, which was being reserved, laid back, and overall good listener. Him knowing exactly when to chime in signaled to everybody that he wasn't just a quiet guy who you need to suspect, but he was somebody that you could lean on. I would say he was the calm of the room. In one of her post show interviews, Natalie, who has won Survivor and took home the grand prize of $1 million, she mentioned that Rob was super chill in person. He felt like a civilian she can trust.
Weird being here, you know? I'm just used to Love Island. It's weird to be wearing clothes. I haven't made out with anybody yet.
First impressions aside, Rob didn't just sit back. He used his charm to build personal bonds. Even in a house full of loud extroverts, he was able to always make you feel safe. One could argue that he did flirt his way to connect with Maura, but someone like Kristen from Top Chef mentioned that he played the game exactly like a faithful. He was always consistent in the way he spoke and acted, and this was towards everyone. One of the main things that stood out to me was how Rob always knew exactly what to say and when to say it. For example, during one of the sessions at the round table, Eric came out to say that he heard Tiffany's laugh during the time he was bound to a tree and blindfolded. This meant that Tiffany must have been a traitor. After Eric made his case and everyone started voting for Tiffany, Rob said, "Tiffany, I voted for you. After hearing what Eric said, and I've listened to his music, this man knows pitch." Now, with Rob being a day one trader, he obviously knew that Tiffany was innocent. So, in Tiffany's point of view, alongside other faithfuls at the table, it clearly came off as, "You can blame Eric for my decision." Now, in Eric's point of view, he must have been thinking, wow, Rob really has my back. This is a guy I can trust. As a viewer watching this live, I was just like, wow, Rob was a serious contender. This dude was dangerously good.
I wouldn't use it. I'm sure kill some people.
So, what makes this charming man so dangerous is that he always gives you the illusion of control. You form this bond, you fully trust him as an ally, and he always lets you think that you're the one making the decision. Whenever he spoke, he always framed the logic so that you will come to the conclusion on your own. He never forced it. In fact, he echoes your conclusion so that you feel proud about what you just thought. So later in the game, when Rob actually took Eric in as a traitor, he allowed Eric to feel like he was part of the team. They made decisions together, or so it seems. When it comes to social game, I think Rob definitely had it in the bag. Now let's move on to his strategy because I think this is what makes him a masterclass trader.
You make a plan, get hit in the mouth, and then you don't know what the to do.
Alright, let's go back to day one. All 24 contestants are sitting at the round table. They're all blindfolded. All they can do is sit and wait as Alan is walking around them in circles. They're all waiting to see if they're going to be selected. As Alan places hands on Rob's shoulders, Rob lets out a smile. The smile shows that he's excited to play. Being a trader is so much fun, and you get to decide people's outcomes. Later that night, when the traders go into the turret and meet each other for the first time, Candace and Lisa are thoroughly excited. They're jumping up and down. These two has known each other for quite some time. They're both from the reality TV Housewives. And while Rob walks in, you can see they all are excited to start the game together as traders. The three of them even made a pact that they wouldn't betray one another. At this point, if you were Rob, you would go with the flow. But there is always something that he would have in his mind, is that he would always be outvoted 2-1. This is because Candace and Lisa have already had a strong bond. If it came to the end and they needed to throw somebody under the bus, it would always be Candace and Lisa versus Rob.
I've got 2 housewives as my fellow traders, and I'm like opposites to them.
But let's move into their first mission of Murder in Plain Sight. This was one of the times where the viewer learned that Rob was a valuable asset and a really smart player. For this mission of Murder in Plain Sight, the traders had to sneak into a room and find a hidden short list of people that they could murder. While other faithfuls were walking around in the castle, Candace and Lisa were able to create a loud distraction for the group. Once Rob found the short list of players, he quickly found Lisa. Rob then asked Lisa if she knew how to play chess and he would teach her. The two of them sat in a room full of other faithfuls. We could see that Rob was able to act under pressure. The two of them were able to make a decision together. In the end, they made a brilliant choice. They got rid of survivor player Rob C that night without even realizing that Rob C was already onto the fact that a murder in plain sight was happening. Unfortunately for Rob C, he had no control of his own fate. Now, between Lisa and Rob, we now know that this team made the right strategic decision that night. One, for getting rid of a strong player, and two, they're able to point fingers at other game show players for being potential murderers.
I'm hard to read. I've been told that by every girl I've ever dated, and I'm extremely competitive. I like to win.
In one of player missions and challenges, Rob had an opportunity to win a dagger. Now, a dagger was a useful tool. This gave you the ability to have your vote counted twice at the round table. Obviously, for Rob as a traitor, he didn't want a faithful to have that in their hands. So we see Rob turning to an athlete, alongside Colton, who was a former football player. They're racing up a hill, trying to grab as many rocks as they could. As we get to the top of the hill and everybody was sharing out their rocks, we see that Rob has the most. Now they get to play another game. Hidden among the players, one person has the dagger. Rob has to figure out who is lying to him about having the dagger. If Rob is able to figure out who is lying to him, he will be able to keep it. This is where we see Rob's mind at work. He starts asking people questions that he knows the answer to. Stuff like what's their name, where are they from? He uses those answers as a baseline to figure out who is lying. Natalie, being the last person that Rob had asked, was kind of giving a close-off vibe, crossing her arms, not looking at him, and so he was able to figure out that she had the dagger. As Rob was able to pull it off, he now has the power of 2 votes in his hands. Now, instead of flexing that power, he instead used reverse psychology. Before walking back into the castle, he asked a small group to keep it a secret, claiming he didn't want to be a target for the traitors. He made a power play look like a liability. This helped create a bond of common knowledge within the group. So if anybody in this group had talked, they would look guilty. On the other part, Rob was able to gain their trust. This was really a calculated risk, but Rob was able to turn a power liability into a social shield. With a dagger in his hand, we now take a closer look at his allies and who he decides to take to the end.
I'm not gonna write Colton. He's super valuable, faithful to be in the game for me.
In the show, Rob admitted that Colton was his most useful faithful. He wanted to keep Colton around as long as he could. Now, why was that? If we look further into Colton as a player of the game, we see that Colton is a cannon. He did all the dirty work and was never afraid to throw out names, whether he was right or wrong. He made some wrong moves, but he also made some right moves in voting out the secret traitor Donna. At this stage of the game, Colton was on the chopping block because people felt like he had too much control. He was always so eager to point fingers, and the faithfuls didn't like that. So despite all of it, Rob knew that he already gained Colton's trust. Keeping him around meant that he would have his numbers at the round table. Voting numbers aside, Colton also acted as a human shield for Rob. When the votes do go wrong, people will be more likely to vote out Colton instead of looking at someone like Rob. As Colton flagged Lisa as a potential traitor, Rob now had to make a choice. Protecting Lisa would mean that he looks suspicious if she gets voted out and reveal herself to be a traitor. Voting for Colton, on the other hand, will make him look super guilty because of their bond. So in this pivotal moment of the game, Rob chose to vote for Lisa. Unfortunately for Rob and Colton, Lisa didn't have enough votes that night and stayed in the game. As the round table ended, Alan announced that there would be a banquet that night. The traitors learned that they would be doing another murder in plain sight. The faithfuls had a hunch that it would happen, so everybody was on edge. Although Rob tried to avoid them as much as he could, Candace and Lisa eventually confronted him in the kitchen. This was such a huge risk because they can easily get caught at any point. We saw that Candace was very overwhelmed by the betrayal of the traitors. She actually lost her cool and was very out of character. I mean, Candace literally threw a piece of food at Rob.
I trusted. Would have been suspicious.
Watching him stab Lisa in the front like he did, I don't trust him.
I think that if anybody else was in Rob's shoes, this could have easily blown up into a huge argument. But instead, we get a calm Rob trying to explain his logic. Rob said that this game doesn't end tomorrow, and it doesn't end the next day, and it doesn't end the next day after that. It's longevity. He implied that he had to vote for Lisa. He had no other choice. We can see that when suspicion was too high, Candace was willing to sink along the ship and help save Lisa's life. Meanwhile, Rob was willing to look at the long game and do what he had to do for the ultimate prize. I would say that Rob's long game speech really showed us his position as a strategic player. Now let's talk about how Rob was able to get rid of his fellow traders who are now too risky to continue to work with.
It is my job to get Traitors out of the game.
I believe Lisa made a fatal mistake in that she volunteered to do the murder in plain sight. Because Lisa was already suspicious, people didn't trust her, and when the person got murdered, they yelled out her name. And so it was not hard for Colton to lead the charge against Lisa yet again, but we saw Rob continue to support Colton's point of views. He positioned himself very carefully. He said, as a faithful, we must vote out a traitor. Now everybody at the table automatically assumes that Rob's a good guy. Even subconsciously, they will remember that he took part in taking down a traitor. On the other hand, Candace refused to read the room. People didn't blame her for not voting for Lisa, but she looked very suspicious because she wrote down Rob's name. She spent that night trying to explain that Rob was just a throwaway name, and it just didn't make sense. Following Lisa's banishment of the game, Candace and Rob now had to make a choice. Either they recruit somebody else as a traitor, or they can murder somebody that night. Because of Candace's anger towards Colton, and knowing that Colton was very valuable to Rob, Candace wanted to murder Colton. Since Rob omitted the fact that Colton was already onto Candace was signing her own death sentence. I was so surprised when I watched this because I was sure that Rob would try to protect Colton. Instead, he was like, yeah, sure, I want to work with you, Candace. Go ahead and murder Colton. She walked right into his trap. Later on, when Candace was on the chopping block, she tried to vote out Rob for a second time. Only this time, it looked like the boy who cried wolf. Nobody in the group was able to see that Candace was trying to give them a hint on who the last traitor was. People were just more convinced that she was just bitter and upset about Lisa's removal. And on that note, Rob was the last original traitor in the game. Per the rules of the game, Rob now had to recruit a new traitor. He had options like Johnny or Natalie. Johnny was a figure skater who was openly supporting Candace, and so choosing him would look good because if Rob needed to vote somebody out, Johnny was the next best case scenario. As for Natalie, he used what he'd learned. He knew that Natalie couldn't lie from the dagger game. Other options included Mark and Kristen, but I think at this point you don't want to choose somebody who still has a close ally in the group. So Rob made a great choice in choosing Eric. He also didn't have anybody else to trust. He was quiet and wouldn't have emotional outbursts like Candace or Lisa. Most importantly, he was also good at challenges. Eric winning a shield shortly after proved that Rob was right. He didn't just recruit a partner, he recruited a protected soldier who would walk him to the very end, someone who would trust Rob more than anybody else. Let's look at the exact point where Rob set himself up to win. At the final 7, Rob was finally feeling the heat and the possibility of getting voted out. Although the majority of the players were already onto Eric managed to win a shield that protected him that night. Since Rob couldn't throw another traitor under the bus, the only choice was another faithful. Rob takes the very dagger he won from Natalie and uses it to banish her from the game. With Natalie gone, the players officially removed the last gamer from the castle. With only 6 players remaining, Rob and Eric had to eliminate another faithful. They chose to murder Mark that very night. I think choosing Mark was a very strategic move. You want to keep players that you can kind of build a case against at the round table. So keeping Tara and Johnny was easier than keeping Mark. And since Mark was already onto Eric, much like Kristen, it just made the most sense. In the finale at Final 5, you can already tell that Rob is smelling victory. Since Rob has Maura and Eric in his pockets, he already has the numbers. But there is one last remaining hurdle. Tara managed to convince Maura that Eric was clearly a traitor. It became more apparent to everybody in the castle that Eric changed very suddenly. He was much more quiet than before. Rob now has to work his magic to protect Eric for as long as he could. He instead convinces Maura to vote out Johnny first. It was quite an easier sell because she didn't already trust him. Other than Rob, Maura only trusted that Tara was a faithful. Despite Tara spending a lot of her time to convince Maura that she needed to vote out Eric now, there was no way that Maura could betray Rob at this stage. Then we get to the final four. Even though Maura knows that Tara isn't a traitor, she still agreed to vote her out. This is because Rob promised, or should I say Pinky promised, that he would vote out Eric as long as she votes out Tara first. He sells her the dream of winning the grand prize and that they'll split the pot. I think he used the Pinky promise to lessen the damage that he was about to do to both of these players. As for Eric, he was never the type of player who would turn on Rob. You can clearly see that Eric was hurt when Rob chose to keep the game going. Eric was feeling genuinely disappointed that he was betrayed. Now with Eric gone, viewers were left with watching the most insane moment of television. We knew what was coming. We first watched Maura joking that she was a traitor and then laughing it off. Then it was Rob's turn. In dramatic fashion, he revealed that he was a traitor and always had been one. You could tell that it took Maura some time to process it all. I definitely think it was stages of grief, from literally thinking that she was about to win. Nevertheless, she was a good sport and still said that he played a really good game.
I'm so sorry. I'm a traitor. I'm serious.
No.
Now, do you think Rob played a perfect game? I think there were moments where if the players had been a little more observant, they could have caught on. Although I would like to note that Rob is great at adapting, and that made it so much harder for people to see through him. The first moment would definitely be when Candace voted him out twice. If you watched season 3 of Traitors, you would know that it was traitors on traitors. Since traitor backstabbing is the name of the game, it would have made perfect sense that after Lisa was caught, Candace would try to pull out on Rob. But because she didn't bring enough receipts to the table, Rob was able to stay calm and just made her look silly. The real problem for the Faithfuls wasn't that they were blind. It's just that they waited too long. Players like Johnny and Tara eventually brought it up, but it was too late. He didn't just survive the accusation. Rob stayed under the radar long enough that it was his game to lose. Then there was the Jack-in-the-Box challenge. When Tara threw out Rob's name as a potential traitor, he had an offbeat reaction. It was only for a split second, but it was still alarming. Tara noted later that in hindsight, that was the first time she saw Game Rob instead of Sweet Rob. There was definitely another moment at a challenge where Rob lost control. His biggest mistake ever. Since Rob was clearly still nervous about Candace voting for him, he felt that he really needed that shield for safety that night. When Rob was eliminated in round 1 of the challenge, he got flustered and angry. This was a reaction that no one had ever seen from him before. He was even angry at Mark, who was his close ally. Players like Natalie noticed and was very shocked. They've never seen him like that throughout the entire game. So no one brought this incident up at the round table that night. And then the Faithfuls were also self-sabotaging and even were quite indecisive. This led to Natalie going home instead of Rob, which solidified his chance at winning the game at the very end. Finally, we have to talk about the Love Island cover. If he was on any other game show like Survivor, people would have been very weary of Rob and Maura. I mean, Johnny and Tara spent the entire season hiding the fact that they were BFFs. It would have been a huge target on their back. So how did Rob manage to do it with Maura so openly? I mean, the house still saw him through the lens of the dating show. They saw harmless flirting instead of high-level in-game alliance that would not break no matter what. So yeah, Rob just played this game exceptionally well. So if we look at the overall bigger picture, Rob Rausch won through his social game, high-level strategy, and physicality. It wasn't just through pure dumb luck or just by having a pretty face. Rob didn't just come to play the game. He fully controlled it and adapted when needed. This is how he won Season 4 of The Traitors and earned the title of one of the best players to ever play the game.
I can be quiet. I'm nimble, like a cat.